All right, let's talk about Family Guy Season 23, Episode 3. You know, sometimes I wonder if the writers are just throwing darts at a wall covered in pop culture references and controversial figures. Because this episode, folks, this episode is a wild ride. We're talking about brewery tours, historical figures getting absolutely roasted, and Brett Kavanaugh making, well, a very Brett Kavanaugh-esque appearance. It's the kind of episode that makes you question what's acceptable, what's funny, and if anyone in the writer's room has ever actually stepped foot outside of a dive bar. And let me tell you, by the end of this thing, you're going to be asking yourself if they went too far, or if they just hit the nail perfectly on the head with their unique brand of chaos. And stick around, because the way they tie in the Supreme Court and marriage equality is something else entirely. You will not see it coming. You guys, if you're finding yourself nodding along or even shaking your head in disbelief, make sure you're subscribed. It really helps the algorithm know that you, the discerning viewer, appreciate this level of deep dive analysis into animated absurdity. Don't want you to miss out on when we tear apart the next chaotic episode. This week, Family Guy decides to take us on a tour, not just of a brewery, but of American history and modern politics, all wrapped up in their signature offensive bow. On the surface, it's about Peter getting a new, highly inappropriate job as a brewery tour guide. But that's just the shiny, beer-soaked wrapper. Underneath, it's a surprisingly pointed, albeit twisted, look at values, history, and the people who supposedly uphold them. The writing at times felt like a fever dream. One minute it's a sharp jab at corporate nonsense, the next it's a historical figure getting his colonial penis shot with arrows, and then suddenly, bam, we're in a Supreme Court hearing that's absurd as it is unsettling. The pacing was a little all over the place, honestly. They tried to juggle Peter's dumb job, a bizarre historical VR experience, and then this whole Brett Kavanaugh storyline, which felt like it was shoehorned in with a sledgehammer. The jokes landed some of the time, but then they'd veer into territory that felt less like satire and more like shock value for shock value's sake. Did it all connect? Well, loosely. They kept hammering home this idea of values, or the lack thereof, but it felt more like a flimsy excuse to bring up whatever controversial topic they could think of. Visually, it was standard Family Guy fare. Nothing groundbreaking, but also nothing to complain about. The VR scene was a decent visual gag, and the courtroom scene had its moments of animated flair. Overall, the episode felt like a typical later season Family Guy episode. A grab bag of jokes and hot-button issues, some of which hit, some of which completely miss, and some of which just leave you feeling weird. It's not the worst episode they've ever done, but it's definitely not a classic. It's more of an, oh, that episode kind of deal. It's going to be divisive for sure. It's the kind of thing that makes you want to argue about it afterwards, which, I guess, is kind of the point of a show like this. But does it make for good television? That's the million-dollar question. And my answer is, it's complicated. Let's dive into the mess. Okay, so the episode kicks off with that classic, jarring intro song, which, let's be honest, always feels like a meta-commentary on the show itself. They're singing about a lack of values and then immediately proceed to throw everything out the window. Peter, in his infinite wisdom, gets a new job as a brewery tour guide. Because who better to explain the finer points of Pawtucket ale than a man whose primary life goal is avoiding any form of responsibility or actual thought? He's so thrilled, he immediately calls his old boss, Mr. Lloyd, to quit. And in true Peter fashion, he doesn't just quit. He gloats about not sending money for his niece's 5K, which is just peak Griffin family dynamic. Then the props they give him for the job are just inspired. A blazer with a suicide history, khakis that are perpetually dirty, and a bruised banana for lunch. It's like a uniform designed by the Grim Reaper on his day off. And Peter's justification for loving telling people where to go? He uses the time he cased a McDonald's for the Hamburglar. Yes, the Hamburglar. This is the level of intellectual rigor we're dealing with here. He's reenacting a heist for a fictional character, complete with the robble-robble sound effects, and then he's genuinely surprised when the actual real-life criminals he's trying to recruit for his tour start getting agitated. It's a classic Peter moment, completely missing the point and causing unintended chaos. Then the tour itself, his opening joke about only half the group having heard of beer, hilarious in its sheer stupidity, and the fact that he gets closer and gets yelled at for it, chef's kiss. The Pawtucket ale fact about DUIs in Rhode Island, that's the kind of dark humor Family Guy excels at, and it's a good early indicator of the kind of jokes we're going to be getting. And then, because this is Family Guy, they cut to Tom Tucker doing a best of news blooper segment. This feels like a deliberate attempt to inject more random comedy, and it's where we get the utterly nonsensical Touth Sower gag. What even is a Touth Sower? It's the kind of wordplay that makes you feel like you're losing your mind, and that's precisely the point. It's the show saying, we're not even trying to make sense anymore. The VR experience about Pawtucket Pat is where things really go off the rails. Casey Affleck as Pawtucket Pat. First of all, the meta joke about him signing the contract and it clashing with Ben and J-Lo's wedding is a great little jab at Hollywood scheduling. You can almost feel Affleck's regret through the screen. He's playing Pawtucket Pat, who apparently came to America in 1771 looking for a better life. The rough seas are described, and then, the punchline, he's welcomed with arrows to his colonial penis. It's violent, it's gross, it's exactly what you'd expect from this show. And the natives' reaction? Arrows, right there. Not a warm welcome. Then we jump to 1776. Pawtucket Pat refuses to sign the Declaration of Independence because, get this, he needs independence from wives who won't let him drink. This is his motivation for American history. He leaves Philadelphia spewing anti-Italian slurs, which of course the show immediately follows up with, all of which are true. It's a cheap shot, but in the context of this show, it's par for the course. The kicker, though, is the reveal that Philadelphia is built on a platform 9,000 feet in the air. What? Where does this even come from? It's pure nonsense. He falls to his death, and then in his final moments, he poops his pants. And the gift shop selling his pants? That's a truly inspired bit of merchandising dark humor. It's the kind of detail that makes you laugh and then immediately feel a little sick about yourself. It's absurd history, rewritten for maximum shock and minimal historical accuracy. It's the Family Guy way. And then the tour ends with a question about Jeff Bezos' cowboy hat. Joe asks it, Peter doesn't know, and the tour wraps up with Peter essentially begging for tips or shamefully accepting avoidance. The whole coward chant from the tour group feels very on the nose for how audiences often react to this show. It's a quick little segment, but it sets the stage for the chaos that's about to unfold with the VIP guest. Because who else but Brett Kavanaugh would want a tour of a brewery, and not just any tour, but a sensitive matter tour? The confusion between Brett Ratner, Brett Favre, and the actual Brett Kavanaugh is a good setup. It highlights how many infamous Bretts there are, and then they land on the Supreme Court justice. Peter's immediate reaction, I don't got a problem with anyone except Jennifer Connelly's husband, is a nice little dig at Paul Bettany, who played Vision in the MCU and is married to Jennifer Connelly. It's a deep cut, but it's funny. Then Kavanaugh arrives, screaming, I love beer, twice. Peter's response, yeah, you've screamed that twice now, is a great deadpan delivery. Kavanaugh explains that screaming it is how he got his job, and Peter relates, saying, me too. It's this immediate bonding over a shared bizarre passion, which is classic Peter. He's not impressed by the Supreme Court justice. He's impressed by another guy who loves beer. This is the kind of ridiculous camaraderie that makes these episodes work, when Peter finds someone he can just be stupid with. Kavanaugh's request for a tour is framed as wanting to see her world, referring to beer as his mistress. He wants Peter to show him the beer. This whole scene is a setup for the degeneracy that follows. The idea of a double keg stand is mentioned, and Peter asks if there are any chicks watching, then says, even better, just guys. This is where the episode starts leaning into the male bonding, slightly sleazy humor that they're clearly going for with Kavanaugh. The bit about beer only being drunk upright is a weird, almost pointless fact. Then we get to the actual experience, where they drink their own pee in the can. No, they didn't actually drink pee, but the implication is there, and it's meant to be gross. Peter's quick denial, no, we didn't, followed by a less confident, right, no, yeah, right, is perfect Peter. He's caught in his own lie. Kavanaugh's line, that's all I want people to say about being cool for a Supreme Court justice, is a nice bit of character work. He's not looking for respect, he's looking for low expectations. The race to be the reddest fastest is just pure drunken idiocy. Kavanaugh saying, I will not be a rotten egg is a fantastic line, showing his competitive, slightly unhinged side. The synchronized swimming joke is a visual gag that just adds to the absurdity. Kavanaugh's mention of people screaming at him in steakhouses about women's bodies is a direct reference to the real-life controversy surrounding him, and it's incredibly uncomfortable. It's this juxtaposition of the silly drunken antics and the very real, very serious accusations that makes this whole segment so jarring. His wife hating Peter actually makes him like Peter more, which is a twisted compliment. And then the college question. Hey, Brett, do you think that we'll still be friends at college? Is a callback to his confirmation hearing, where he famously said he might be invited to parties by the people he accused him. It's a dark joke, but again, it lands because it's so specific to the real person they're parodying. The episode then jumps to the morning after, with Peter waking up and thinking he killed Brett Kavanaugh. The note from Kavanaugh is hilariously dark, saying, "You take it, Brett," referring to his life, and then a postscript about putting clothes on someone without their consent. This is a direct jab at the allegations against him, and it's incredibly bold. The joke about Space Monkey and the Supreme Court justices being assembled is pure insult comedy. They're depicted as a bunch of petty, bickering people, which, to be fair, is not entirely out of the realm of possibility for politicians. The idea that they're trying not to die until someone from their party is president is a cynical but sharp observation about political motivation. The list of cases they're considering, bakery refusing to bake cakes for gay weddings, trans anniversaries, dog birthdays, is a perfect Family Guy satire of the seemingly endless culture war battles. It's reducing complex issues to absurd, repetitive scenarios. The hometown buffet versus Peter Griffin case about hot dog water is a masterclass in Peter-centric absurdity. It's a nonsensical legal battle that's perfectly suited for him. And then the punchline. They're all out of beer because the Cav drank it all. This brings us back to Kavanaugh's characterization as a party animal, a man who loves beer to an almost destructive degree. Peter's line, "I hate that guy," followed by Kavanaugh's entrance, "Sup, I'm the Cav," is the perfect comedic timing. He's an immediate unwelcome guest. His plea for one beer is met with a grudging acceptance. The golf analogy comparing missed putts to not knowing where the ball goes is a relatable, albeit mundane, setup for a much darker punchline. When Kavanaugh brings up not knowing if his dad hates him, it's another callback to his real-life testimony. It's incredibly heavy, and the fact that Peter's reaction is, "Brett Kavanaugh, you're all right," shows how easily he's swayed by, well, anything that isn't too much work. Stairs. It's a dark, dark joke that really pushes the envelope. The commitment from Peter and the others to go anyway, even with the potential stare situation, speaks volumes about their characters and their priorities, or lack thereof. The Watermelon Sugar High song interlude, with its overt sexual undertones, feels like a deliberate tonal shift. It's bizarre to cut from the serious implications of Kavanaugh's past to this overtly sexualized, carefree moment. It's the show deliberately messing with your head. Lois confronting Peter about his hair and beard is a nice domestic scene. She's clearly been holding down the fort while he's been off being Peter. His justification, "This is the first time in our marriage I've ever done anything for me," followed by the immediate backtrack about letting her drink with friends for 22 years, is pure Peter. He can't help but make it about himself and then undermine his own supposed selflessness. The mention of the Supreme Court hearing a case to repeal gay marriage is the pivot point. Brian's always the voice of reason, and here he's urging Peter to take the opportunity to do good. Lois, surprisingly, is also pushing him, recognizing the gravity of the situation. Peter's filters coming off and him drinking a lot of water is a classic, shallow interpretation of being serious. Then the question, do you have an OnlyFans? And the DM reference is a bizarrely sexual turn. It's like the show can't help but inject sex into every conversation, even about serious legal matters. The Supreme Court scene where they're deadlocked 4-4 and the decision to repeal gay marriage hinges on Kavanaugh is the central political commentary. The convoluted explanation of yes meaning no and no meaning yes is deliberately confusing, highlighting the absurdity of legal jargon. Peter's comparison of Kavanaugh to a dog with a bone on no means yes is a pretty savage jab, referencing the accusations of sexual assault. The final decision is the most outrageous part. Kavanaugh says, "Fetuses will be so psyched to hear that," which is a direct nod to the anti-abortion stance, but then he flips it. We must not only ban gay marriage, we have to ban straight marriage. This is pure, unadulterated chaos. It's the most extreme, illogical conclusion to the entire debate. His justification, "I hate my crazy wife," is the ultimate Peter Griffin move, applying his own domestic grievances to a nationwide legal decision. It's a hilarious, terrifying, and deeply cynical take on how personal biases can seep into monumental rulings. The joke about the Supreme Friends and their internal squabbles, referencing specific justices like Sotomayor, Kagan, Thomas, and Alito, is sharp political satire. Describing them as the most boring forces of good ever assembled is a perfect backhanded compliment. The visual gag of Sonia Sotomayor being Aquaman and Barrett and Bound Jackson being the Wonder Twins is fun, but the real jab is calling Kavanaugh their space monkey. They're all depicted as dysfunctional, self-serving individuals. The case list of cake-related disputes is a perfect summary of the culture war, and then the hometown buffet versus Peter Griffin case about hot dog water is a brilliant return to Peter's nonsensical world. The entire scene where they're out of beer because Kavanaugh drank it all is a great callback to his characterization, and the other justices' reactions of "I hate that guy" shows a shared frustration even amongst supposed allies. His plea for one beer and the golf analogy where he brings up his dad hating him again solidifies his character as deeply troubled and desperately seeking approval, even in the most inappropriate settings. The beach house party invitation and the immediate concern about stairs is pure genius, a direct reference to the allegations against him. The fact that they're still 100% in shows the lengths people will go to for a party, or perhaps their own desensitization to serious issues. The transition into the Watermelon Sugar High song is jarring, but it's the show's way of saying we can go from serious political commentary to overtly sexualized absurdity in seconds. It's about keeping you off balance. The scene with Peter trying to make his supreme food court joke about the mall is exactly the kind of thing Peter would think is hilarious and then immediately botch. Clarence's lunch being forgotten is a small but sweet moment, showing a bit of genuine care from Peter, which is rare. Lois's frustration with Peter's appearance is a relatable moment for anyone who's ever been with someone who doesn't take care of themselves. Her line, "Because you took a lifetime appointment in Washington, I'm doing everything," is a powerful statement of resentment. Peter's weak defense about letting her drink at a bar is pathetic. And Lois's immediate sarcasm, "Oh, I just knew you'd hold that against me at some point," is the perfect response. Brian's talking about the case to repeal gay marriage is where the episode tries to inject some actual social commentary. He's right. It's a chance for Peter to do some good. Lois's response, "Would you stop playing with filters and listen?" feels very modern, as people often hide behind digital personas. Peter's claim of taking filters off and drinking water is his typical superficial approach. The OnlyFans bit is just Family Guy. They cannot help themselves. It's a quick, cheap laugh that feels out of place in a serious discussion. The actual Supreme Court deliberations are chaotic. The back and forth about the definition of yes and no is deliberately convoluted. Kavanaugh's reasoning to ban straight marriage is the ultimate non sequitur, born from a place of personal spite. It's so over the top that it circles back to being funny, in a dark, disturbing way. His proclamation, "I hate my crazy wife," is the cherry on top of his irrational decision-making. Clarence forgetting his lunch is a nice callback to Lois's earlier frustration with Peter. The line, "It sucks that this is the only hat to overthrow democracy in," is a really sharp piece of writing, highlighting how seemingly small decisions can have massive consequences. The argument about freedom and the examples of a toothbrush on a sink and a bar of soap with no pubes are hilariously absurd and surprisingly poignant. It's the show's way of satirizing the absurdity of the culture war, using completely unrelated analogies to make its point. Now, let's talk characters. Peter, as usual, is the engine of chaos. He's got his new, terrible job, he's being completely irresponsible, and he manages to insert himself into the most sensitive of situations. His transformation into a sort of reluctant political player, however brief and misguided, is peak Peter. He's not good at anything, but he stumbles into positions of power and influence anyway. His absolute lack of self-awareness is both his greatest flaw and his greatest comedic asset. He's not just dumb, he's actively oblivious, and that's what makes him so frustratingly hilarious. In this episode, he's more of a catalyst than a fully developed character, driving the plot forward through sheer idiocy. His interactions with Kavanaugh are particularly telling, showing how he can bond with anyone over the most superficial things, completely ignoring the real-world implications of who that person is. It's a testament to his unchanging nature that even when faced with serious political issues, he defaults to his most basic instincts: beer, food, and avoiding work. Brett Kavanaugh, as a character in this episode, is a caricature of himself. They lean heavily into the public perception of him, a love for beer, a certain unhinged energy, and a connection to past accusations that's both uncomfortable and darkly comedic. His dialogue is designed to provoke and to poke fun at the real-life controversies surrounding him. The episode uses him as a vehicle to explore themes of power, excess, and the blurred lines between personal life and public duty. The way he interacts with Peter, seeing him as a kindred spirit rather than a subordinate brewery worker, highlights his desire for validation and his inability to maintain a professional distance. His character arc, if you can call it that, is about being a slightly more unhinged version of his public persona, amplified for comedic effect. He's not given depth, he's given punchlines, and the writers weaponize his public image to create discomfort and laughter. Lois, bless her heart, is once again the exasperated voice of reason and the primary caregiver for the entire Griffin clan. She's dealing with Peter's latest absurd career choice and the general mayhem who follows him. Her frustration is palpable, but she also manages to push Peter towards a semblance of responsibility when it truly matters, like with the Supreme Court case. Her character serves as the grounding force in the episode, the one who constantly has to clean up the messes and remind Peter of the real world. In this episode, she's given a moment to express her own frustrations with Peter's selfishness, which is a nice touch. She's not just a nag, she's a woman who's been through a lot with Peter and has her own needs and desires, which are often overlooked. Her role is essential in highlighting Peter's flaws by contrast. Brian, of course, is the intellectual conscience of the show, and he's given the crucial task of explaining the stakes of the Supreme Court case. He's the one who articulates the importance of protecting gay marriage and urges Peter to do the right thing. His character provides the moral compass, even if Peter rarely listens. Brian's presence in these kinds of episodes is vital for giving the show a veneer of substance, even when it's indulging in its most outlandish humor. He's the character who represents what the show could be if it weren't so committed to pushing boundaries and defending people. His dialogue often feels like the writers speaking directly through him, delivering the intended message, however much the rest of the episode seems to contradict it. In this episode, he's the catalyst for Peter's brief moment of potential civic duty. The ensemble of Supreme Court justices are all played for laughs, reduced to archetypes and petty grievances. John Roberts, Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, Sonia Sotomayor, Elena Kagan, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett, and Ketanji Brown Jackson. They're depicted as a squabbling bunch, their personal opinions and prejudices coloring their interpretation of the law. Their interactions are designed to satirize the political divisions on the court, portraying them as almost cartoonish figures, locked in a battle of egos and ideologies. The joke about Gorsuch not being in the lineup, but mentioned as being from Harvard, feels like a subtle nod to the ideological leanings of the justices. The fact that they're all gathered for a morning introduction is another layer of satire, making the highest court in the land seem like a quirky office environment. Their motivations are boiled down to partisan survival, trying to avoid dying until a president from their party can appoint replacements. It's a cynical but effective way to critique the politicization of the judiciary. The writing here is sharp, reducing these powerful figures to relatable, flawed human beings, albeit exaggerated for comedic effect. Hidden gems? Oh, there are plenty in an episode like this. First off, the very choice to put Brett Kavanaugh in this episode is itself a hidden gem of audacity. They aren't just referencing him, they're making him a central, albeit cartoonish, character. The specific callbacks to his confirmation hearing, like the "friends at college" line and the mention of stairs, are Easter eggs for anyone who followed that saga closely. They're not just poking fun, they're referencing specific moments that became cultural touchstones. Then there's the Touth Sower gag. It's so random and nonsensical that it functions as a sort of meta-joke. It's the show admitting it's running out of ideas, or that sometimes the funniest thing is pure gibberish. It's an Easter egg for people who appreciate sheer absurdity. The visual gag of Peter's blazer having a history of people hanging themselves in it is dark, but the fact that it's just presented as a normal prop for a tour guide is a classic Family Guy move. It's a background detail that adds to the overall sense of grim absurdity that permeates Peter's world. They don't dwell on it, they just toss it in there as part of the scenery. Also, the quick jab at Jennifer Connelly's husband, Paul Bettany, by Peter, is a deep cut. It's a blink and you'll miss it reference that shows they're playing with a wider range of celebrity knowledge and humor. It's not directly related to the plot, but it adds another layer for the observant viewer. And finally, the entire premise of Pawtucket Pat's history, the arrows to the penis, the reason for not signing the Declaration, the city built on a platform, is a masterclass in rewriting history for comedic effect. These aren't just jokes, they're tiny, self-contained historical parodies that would be easily missed if you weren't paying attention to the sheer outlandishness of it all. They're not trying to be accurate, they're trying to be shocking and funny, and the fact that they're so absurd makes them a kind of hidden gem of comedic writing. What if they did it differently? Let's talk about the Brett Kavanaugh storyline. The original choice was to have him be this drunken, party-loving guy who gets into a bizarre situation with Peter. But what if they had leaned harder into the political satire? Instead of just making him a caricature, what if they explored the idea of a Supreme Court justice being so out of touch or so driven by personal bias that he would ban all marriage? The episode touches on this with the "hate my crazy wife" line, but it could have been a more pointed commentary. Imagine a scenario where Kavanaugh, genuinely believing he's doing the right thing based on a twisted interpretation of the law or his own personal philosophy, is brought down by Peter's sheer idiocy. Or alternatively, what if the Pawtucket Pat VR experience was actually integrated into the Brewery tour in a more meaningful way? Right now, it feels like a standalone segment. What if Pat's historical struggle for independence from wives who won't let us drink was somehow tied to modern-day issues of alcohol consumption or personal freedom? It would have given the VR segment more purpose and connected it better to the overall Brewery theme. It felt a bit like they just threw it in because it was a funny historical rewrite. My version would have seen Peter's tour guide job become less about random encounters and more about him actually having to explain the history of beer or brewing, and in doing so, he completely butchers it, leading to the VR experience as a historical correction that's even more messed up. The ending with the Supreme Court case felt a little abrupt. What if Peter, after his chaotic interactions with Kavanaugh, actually had to cast a deciding vote on something related to marriage equality, and his decision was based on something incredibly trivial, like who gave him the best beer? It would be peak Peter, and a more fitting conclusion to his involvement in such a serious matter. So, the verdict on Season 23, Episode 3. I'm giving this one a 6.8 out of 10. It gets points for sheer audacity and some genuinely funny moments, especially the historical roast and the early Peter Brewery shenanigans. The political commentary, while uncomfortable, was definitely present and pointed. However, it loses points for the uneven pacing, the gratuitous nature of some of the jokes, and the way it felt like it was trying to tackle too many controversial topics without fully committing to any of them. It's an episode that will probably appeal most to the die-hard Family Guy fans, who appreciate the shock value and the willingness to push boundaries, even when it borders on tasteless. For the casual viewer, it might be too much too soon. What would have pushed the score higher? A more cohesive narrative and a less jarring transition between the absurd humor and the political commentary. Maybe if the Kavanaugh storyline had felt more integrated into the Brewery plot, or if the Supreme Court satire had been allowed to breathe a little longer without being overshadowed by Peter's antics. Ultimately, this episode is a prime example of Family Guy in its later seasons. A messy, often brilliant, but always provocative mix of gross-out humor and sharp satire that leaves you questioning what you just watched. And that, I guess, is the enduring appeal of this show, for better or worse.